Hello and welcome to The Caring View, the online social care chat show that was previously exclusive to YouTube, but is now available on all major podcasting sites. I'm going to give that another couple of weeks until we've really plugged the heck out of our new podcast, until that new car smell has gone from the podcast. I'm still going to plug that. We are all over the place at the moment. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're on YouTube. Tap that bell. Make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And like I say, go and check out our podcast. You can catch it on your favorite sites, whether you're on Spotify, Audible, Amazon, Apple, Google, you name it, we're there. And the views we express tonight are of our own and not our respective companies. Good evening, Mark. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Thank you very much. You?
I'm good. I'm tired. I've spent the majority of today being really tired, thinking, am I unwell? Am I coming down with something? And I had a really hot bath about an hour ago. And you know when you don't know what's wrong and you have a hot bath and it just fixes everything. It fixed everything. It was a really good hot bath. And I'm raring to go now. I could do like another 9-hour day's work. I'm here. I'm ready for it. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Oh no, a hot bath. I just end up falling asleep in the bath and then I wake up and the water's like freezing cold and I don't want to move on that.
We've had this conversation and nowhere on the Caring View will we advocate having a nap in a bath. If you've seen Freddy Krueger, you know what happens if you have a nap in a bath. So no napping in a bathtub. No napping in a bathtub. Have we got anything new we need to speak about this week? I know in a couple of weeks' time we've got the UK Care Show. UK Care Week show, I should say, in Birmingham at the NEC. I'll be there myself as part of the IHSEM and the People Plan, and obviously representing the Caring View and IHSEM interviewing Ed Balls. So if you aren't there, you haven't got your tickets booked, do get them booked, 6th and 7th at Birmingham NEC. Have we got anything else, Mark, coming up that we need to let people know about?
Not that I can think of. You were spoken about the podcast, which is going down well, which is nice. And I think we always knew we had people listen on playback, but I think the comments that we kind of receive saying it actually makes it more accessible in the car and bits and pieces is always good. Then we're always conscious that people were joining YouTube and then potentially trying to watch us, listen to us while driving along. But yeah, no, so that's good. But yeah, social care news. There isn't much. I think the NHS released the ICS guidance, didn't they? And kind of who made up the boards. And I think I did a tweet that got a lot more attention kind of than I thought of, but social care isn't on there anywhere. I think off the back of that, I've spoken to a couple of board members of ICSs, which has been quite beneficial. And I think they're keen to get people from social care on, but they will never form part of the board because that will form with the local authority. So the only way to get on is really under the partnership section. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how that pans out. But I know that we've got, in a few weeks' time, and I don't know the date off the top of my head, session on ICSs and to get a catch up on kind of how they're going and to speak to providers about kind of are they involved or not. So
yeah, well, I mean, 1st of July, we're all going to wake up and integrated care is going to have happened overnight. We're going to be laughing ourselves into a wonderful co-production world of ICSs and ICBs all around the country. Like you say, we are going to have a conversation about that at some point. We're also going to be having a conversation on the show coming up soon because you've been ruffling feathers recently, haven't you? About speaking at care conferences. And, you know, for those who know, Mark and I do make the rounds and we do like to go to these care conferences as much as possible. But I saw a LinkedIn post of yours this week that ruffled a few feathers.
Yes. So I was asked to speak at an event, which was fine. I'm happy to kind of speak. And then I saw the price of the tickets and they were like £300 and something each. And I contacted them and I was like, so I'll always ask somebody, what is the price of the ticket for? Is it to cover the overheads? Is it to cover the food, the venue, whatever it is? But I kind of thought like £300 for a ticket, that's way more. And I knew there was like 100 tickets. So I did the maths and I thought that's way more than the overheads. And so I just pulled out because I kind of feel like the advice and like what I want to talk about is aimed at kind of anybody really that will listen. But I don't want to price out the registered manager and the care workers and the seniors and any therapy staff that might be out there that, you know, just can't afford and probably wouldn't ever get the opportunity from their organisations to go to those kind of events. But I think it did spark quite a lot of conversation about actually should people, and I think behind the scenes, like I know you and I had spoken about it, I had conversations with other people about, should we be asking these organisations if they're charging such an excessive amount, can we get paid? And I know people have said, can we get our travel expenses paid, or can you do hotels? And the answer's always been no from the people that I've spoken to. So then when they go on and charge kind of an extortionate amount, you kind of think, well, it's obviously all for profit, but we're the ones giving the advice and the information away for free. So yeah, somebody commented and I thought it was good advice. It was, if the event is free, go along and talk. If the event is paid, go along and talk, but be paid for it. So yeah.
And I suppose that's all about understanding our own worth, isn't it? And it doesn't just go for us who goes and do the talks, but it's when everyone always says, oh, make sure you've got experts by experience joining you. Well, that's absolutely fine, but they predominantly won't be getting paid to come to these events in their own capacity. You know, our work might pay us to go and attend them, but we've got to make sure that we're paying people their actual worth and not expecting everything for nothing, if you know what I mean. I'm a huge advocate for trying to, I know exposure doesn't pay the bills all the time, but anything we can possibly do to help recompense people and remunerate the work that they're putting in. And especially if you're blatantly going, oh, no, we can't, we're counting your pound notes, we can't afford to pay you for this. No, 300,000 down on the table. So, right, wonderful, brilliant. Tonight, it's Men's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. For those of you who will follow me on LinkedIn, I'm quite candid and open about the struggles that I have with my mental health, from small little incidents to huge, massive, full-blown incidents. I try and be as open as I can be, always have been. I've struggled over the last sort of 5 years to be as open as I can be. That's that mentality. You're a manager, you're a leader, you need to be strong. Don't let people see you cry, don't be weak. And that in itself hasn't been healthy, it hasn't been good. So I'm really looking forward to this show tonight. And we've got two absolutely fantastic, fully experted guests joining us. So I'd like to introduce you all to Martyn Dawes and Simon Blake. Good evening, Martyn and Simon. How are you both?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me. It's nice to see you, Adam, and nice to see you, Mark, and put faces to the names after such a long time.
Very well indeed. I'm on a break in Cornwall this week, and the sun is shining, and where better to be than in Cornwall when the sun is shining? So yeah, very good. Thanks for having me.
I'm absolutely incredibly jealous. I love Goon Hilly. I love Padstow. I love the Eden Project. Oh, Cornwall is a most magical place. I'm incredibly jealous that you are there, and I'm sat up here in Blackpool. So, Martyn, Simon, do you want to just give a bit of an introduction to our guest? Martyn, if you want to go first, tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Well, starting from a little while ago, I used to be a prison governor. So I was a prison governor for 20 years. So it's one of the, it's widely regarded as one of the most stressful jobs you can have. Then I took voluntary redundancy and commissioned a retirement village, which was completely different, but it's another people business. And from there, then I went into social care. And I've been alongside that. I've been coaching alongside that for about 20 years as well. So I have that sort of a unique coaching experience, but also the experience of working in social care and the experience of knowing what extreme stress looks like as well. So I'm sort of like wrapped that all together when I wrote my book last year, The Overwhelmed Manager, that was really quite well received, and built my Facebook group, which is doing flourishing quite well at the moment, because there is such a need out there. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Martyn. And Simon, good evening.
Hello. So I'm the Chief Executive of social enterprise Mental Health First Aid England, which is a training organisation and delivers training around mental health first aid. I guess the link, really, my first ever job, which interestingly seems to be only 10 years ago in my mind and 30 years ago when you look on paper, was working around men's sexual health in South Wales Valleys. So a project which was funded to look at masculinity and sexual health and sexuality. And actually, of course, what we know is around gender roles and expectations that impact on all aspects of people's lives, but in the context of tonight, men's lives. And so, yeah, really good to be here tonight. I guess outside of MHFA England, I also chair the Support After Suicide Partnership, which is a body which brings together those organisations which support people who've been bereaved by suicide, and also the Headspace Health, their international advisory board, which, as many of you know, the Headspace app, which is all about meditation and mindfulness, and also the Dying Matters campaign. I feel very, very strongly that we need to understand what dying is going to look like in order to understand what living looks like, and living and dying are really strongly interrelated. So that's the other role that I have, and I think is an important conversation that we should also have. Whether we have it tonight is a whole different story.
I think you've just summed up my entire thought process about my own mental health in what you do, Simon. I think it's I don't know. I was saying to Mark, and it's this conversation my partner and I have quite a lot of the time. We call it, the toxic masculinity, the toxic femininity within society, and it's that understanding what our gender roles should be. So I'm going to give you both a bit of a background about myself before we get into the conversation, because I think it'll be useful to know where I come from. So I identify as a gay male. I'm obviously white. I struggled when I was 17 when I came out. I struggled with eating problems. I would not eat for days and days on end because that was something I could control within my life. My family weren't well receiving of my sexuality, my orientation. So I was sofa jumping, car hopping, sleeping in my car quite a lot of times, which obviously affected what I do. And I became very unwell over a period of 3 days when I got gastroenteritis, and I hadn't been eating, and body went into shock, all of that sort of stuff. And I really struggled with understanding what my place was within society, because I didn't come across as overtly masculine. I didn't want to be overtly masculine. I wanted to move into social care, which, even 15 years ago was a role for the women and the gays, and that's how it was perceived. And I've also struggled with social anxiety much of my life. I'm very overt. I can be overt, an extrovert, and be great at parties and conferences and on the show, but in really bizarre situations like going to the shops, being in crowded spaces where I don't know anybody and I can't see where the exits are and I don't know where I'm going to be going after that, I really struggle with anxiety. I struggle with panic attacks. I hadn't had one for about 9 months. There's a really proud LinkedIn post going, I've not had a panic attack for like 9 months. It's been incredible. And then was absolutely floored by one the following Sunday and just couldn't catch my breath. It was, at a family gathering. It was embarrassing. And that sort of feeds into it then, doesn't it? When you're embarrassed and it's happening, feeds into it. So I've struggled with all of those sort of things throughout my life, and it's trying to educate people what my experiences are, whilst understanding what I should be doing. And I say should as in a term that everyone should know what they should be doing, which we don't know, whilst also changing the way we move forwards as well. So I know it's really meaty to get into to start off with, but it is Men's Mental Health Week, and there is that toxic masculinity that boys don't cry. We don't say how we're feeling. We don't do what we're doing. And, not to take sides between Amber and Johnny Depp, but there's that famous recording of her telling Johnny, go and tell the world, that, oh, Johnny Depp, I'm a man getting beaten up by a woman, and there is that idea that actually men can't express themselves in that situation and be honest about how they feel. And that in turn can exacerbate the feelings that we're having. So toxic masculinity, is it still the correct term? And what do we need to know as a society, as a community around that toxic masculine? And I'll come to you first, Simon.
Gosh, where to start? I mean, I think the most important thing actually to just start this conversation is this tonight, for the purpose of talking about men's mental health or men's health, it isn't about, is it worse or better for women? There's no argument about the existence of the patriarchy. There's no argument about the existence of racism, of homophobia, of people's perceptions around people's ability, disability, etc. But what there really is a very strong straitjacket, which all of us grow up knowing, learning, understanding about, which is masculinity. And yes, there's been changes. There's been all sorts of development, and it's brilliant that that sometimes you get people who are doing things in very particular ways. So more men going and picking their children up from school, or men not talking about babysitting, talking about looking after their children. no doubt that there are some things which are changing, but the systems and structures which have been in place for decades and centuries, which mean that men learn how to behave in particular ways and are expected to behave in particular ways and put on a mask because they cannot necessarily behave in those ways and feel integrated and whole exists. And so I guess for me, that sort of bit that we got shift is that we bully boys and rough them up. You know, we tell them they behave in particular ways and then we punish them quite quickly for behaving in those ways. And that's confusing, and it disempowers and it disassociates and it makes them angry and all those things. So for me, the key bit in underpinning everything you said is let's let children be children and boys and girls and non-binary people express themselves however they want without the shackles of centuries of gendered expectation. And if we could do that, then we would be we would be being radical. We would be changing the world, because we know that so many boys and girls and non-binary people end up just feeling they're not good enough. They feel like they don't fit in. They feel like they're a square peg in a round hole. And it's not the individuals we need to change. It is the whole, I guess, would be my sort of starting comment. And that accepts everything about patriarchy, racism, homophobia, all of those sorts of things, which mean that there's all sorts of privileges within that. But ultimately, anything which limits people's ability to be who they are in whatever way will only ever create problems.
And we had a show a number of months back now where we actually spoke about heteronormacies in microaggressions and that sort of impacting a status quo on people before it actually starts. Why Florida in this Don't Say Gay bill, I know it's not called that, but the inability to actually teach under nines now in Florida the existence of homosexuality, and people don't push that agenda on people, but actually we're pushing a heterosexual agenda, if we want to call them agendas, on people as well, and it inhibits that natural development of our brains. It stops that emotional development. Martyn, I want to come to yourself as well, because published author, huge expert on mental health and being overwhelmed. What's your take on the ability for men to be who they are and express who they are?
I think your key word in your opening statement was "should." That's the word that really stood out for me, and I think that's one of the most damaging words that we have. We should be like this. We should be like X. We should be like Y. And it's people are people, and as we grow, especially during those really early formative years, we get to form our view of the world, and then we see the world through our view. So it's only ever our viewpoint. So we're looking at the world through what we believe to be true, and people are doing the same as well. So they're looking at us through what they believe to be true. So none of you have got the truth, only your version of the truth. So we're trying to fit into a world where actually there is no fitting in, because it's just everybody's different. Everybody's got a different viewpoint anyway. As I say on some of my blogs, everyone's got a different version of you, including you. So this idea about having to fit in, to me, is a bit of a anathema, if that's the correct word. Because we don't need to fit in, because there is no need to. Everybody's going to have a different version and anyway. So I think my sort of view is much broader, but this idea that we should be like something, is probably very, very damaging.
I think you touched on a good point, and I think there's so much awareness on social media and out and about being you and being the real you. But then you go on somewhere like Instagram or something, and it is about how you should be perceived or how others think you should be perceived. And I'm not on Instagram because I think it's really toxic. But Martyn, you're on Facebook, so you obviously see a lot of posts and bits and pieces and people. Do you see a negative impact from social media around kind of what you should conform to, especially obviously for managers in social care? Because I think they pit themselves against one another because somebody's got an outstanding or a good and they've got requires improvement, or somebody's most students have worked a 60, 70-hour week, and somebody feels bad that they've only done the 35, 40 hours. So what's your experience on social media?
I think social media, I mean, it can be really helpful and really supportive, and it can be quite toxic as well. But even from someone who is supposed to know this stuff, I still get caught up in that. I don't beat myself up over it, but if I see someone as another social care commentator getting a really good reaction, half of me is thinking, oh yeah, that's great. The other half of me thinking, oh, why couldn't that be me? You know, why can't I get that sort of reaction? You know, I want some of that. So there is always going to be that sort of natural reaction there. But there is an awful lot of good supportive work as well. And I think when we get out of the way of what we think we should be doing and actually talk to people on a heart-to-heart basis, on a soul-to-soul basis, you get a very different perception. One of my most successful posts, actually in the Overall Manager group, was something that I picked up from somewhere else. And it was simply that if we could only see each other's souls rather than people, what a different world we would live in. And it really exploded. And I think people really resonated with that. And that goes sort of against this culture of this social media personality versus who we really are when we strip all that away. And I think that's where I like to get to, and I'm sure Simon does too.
I mean, surely it's more than just social media, though, as well, isn't it? It's the media itself. So I've recently just started going to the gym. You know, apparently exercise helps with your mental health. It helps with positive endorphins and, you know, keeps you boosted. So begrudgingly, I drag myself there. But I'm not one of these people that will eat a plain chicken breast with rice and broccoli because it's good for me, because I like flavor and I like taste. But I also enjoy a good popcorn cinema film, and the amount of men we now see in these superhero roles, in these action movie roles, where they are excessively bulked up, and I mean excessively bulked up. Chris Evans came out this week and said he's dropped just over a stone since quitting his superhero role because he's not having to go to the gym and do stuff like that. And then I'm on TikTok and I'm watching men who are working out going, I actually don't put seasoning on my chicken, because if I put seasoning on my chicken, it's going to make me want to have more flavorful foods. That in itself is affecting our mental health, is the perception that the media are putting out there. So what can we do to try and block ourselves from that? It's difficult. It's always there. But what are the sort of thought processes we should be thinking to ourselves, instead of comparing ourselves to what we see, to actually thinking what is actually healthy and what's achievable for me in my life?
So I'll just come back on this. I think I think all of your questions are really valid. I just think let's not get overly worried about social media. It feels like it's a context thing. And when I was a child in the 70s and early 80s, all of those things which social media now takes responsibility for, the media took responsibility for, or something else took responsibility for, because that is the nature of it. And whatever comes after social media, I mean, goodness knows what that will be, will take responsibility. You know, it's just another outlet, and it's another influence. It's another way, you know. So if I just think about what were the things that made me feel like I hear people attributing social media to, it was, you know, not being picked for the team for football, not getting on, you know, the athletics team, seeing pictures in the magazine, seeing friends, looking at magazines or other people in ways that I didn't know or understand or couldn't compute. So the bit which I would just say right back is, let's remember that whatever is going on around us, it's the feelings, and it's the feeling, whether it's about being young, being good enough, being man enough, being, you know, competent, whatever it is that we need to try to help ourselves to manage. And so for me, I think that the core bit about how do we put those things out. So as you were talking, Adam, I was thinking, gosh, on a different day, I might be the one who's going, do you know what? I'm not going to have any sauce on the chicken. I might be the one who's going, I'm not going to, have any meat for a month because I think that's important. Or I might not be saying that I'm not going to drink any alcohol for a month. And somehow what we've got to do is to help people to recognize their brilliance. and to understand their brilliance and to believe in who they are, who we are, what we stand for. And the way that we often do it is to say, stand out from the crowd, stand up for who you are. When actually what we should be doing is going, be part of the crowd, stand up for who you are, say what you think. Yeah, being part of the crowd is saying what you think, being who you are, doing what you want to do, and creating social norms that allow for difference and diversity. And if you think about some of the changes that we are seeing and understanding, particularly around gender diversity in generations, and actually what that shows is that if we trust children and young people, if we help them, if we cheerlead them, if we support them, they create that sort of positive change. And even right back to basics around mental health. There's so much we've still got to do right. But 4 men would not have been sat having this conversation when I was a child. Anywhere. There wasn't an internet for them to play, but it wouldn't have been commissioned on mainstream TV. So how do we create spaces in which people can understand who they are, believe who they are, believe in who they are, and feel brilliant about that is probably the question. Whether that's about social media now or in 5 years' time, I'm not so sure. I think the challenge will always be that sense of self-worth, self-confidence. What does it take to actually get people to understand that being who they are is enough? Is perhaps the question which I would be posing and asking, rather than what can we do to block out the noise? Because I'm not sure we can block out the noise. I think that's a bit whether it's the noise we've got now or the noise of the future. I think there's something about how do we actually build that real sense of self-worth from an early age.
I think for me, a lot of it comes down to, I've got 3 young children. It's just about being honest and giving them the information in the format that they can understand. And I think I like to think that I'm very honest with my kids. If they ask me a question, I always answer it. But there's a lot of kind of pushback from other parents about, oh, should you be telling them that? Or should you be telling them that? Or, if they ask why somebody's crying or, whatever it is. But I think there's still that kind of, oh, kids are really sensitive. You shouldn't be telling them that until they're X age. And, like, my 3 kids know Adam, they know he's gay. And it's just about having that open conversation, explaining what that is, and actually that's normal. And but I think then they obviously go off, and parents obviously get a bit annoyed with me that I've kind of educated my children in something. But one thing I was kind of looking at before the show was around some of the stats. So I was on the NHS website, and it was talking about the stats and the figures look at kind of psychological talking therapies, and the percentage of referrals for females and percentage of men. So only 36% of referrals to talking therapies are for men. Why do you think, Simon, that the uptake is so low?
What we know is that men go to a doctor or to ask for help at the point that things are really going wrong. So I'm not sure the stat that you've got is about the percentage of men who go, that 36% get referred, or that 36% as opposed to then 64% women, 36% men, I think is the bit. But we know that men will often go for help when it's too late or when it's a crisis point. And so that's the bit which is needs to shift. If you think, I don't know how old your children are, Mark, but when children fall over, that sort of sense of pick them up and dust them off and tell them to get on as quick as possible, rather than go, oh gosh, that obviously hurt. Giving them a cuddle, and often those responses are gendered. They're, boys will get a come on, man up sort of response more than girls will. Whereas actually, we all know that asking for help is something which all of us, or needing help, is something that all of us will need at some point in time. So how do we teach from a really early age that not only is asking for help a good thing, but actually rewarding them then for asking for help and for saying that they need help or comfort. And if we can do that for everybody, regardless of their gender identity, then that has to be a really good thing. And as I say, we know that men often go when it's too late, or when they're at an absolute point of crisis, and therefore getting help is more complicated, more difficult, and takes more time to resolve. And that's one of the things that we really need to shift.
I mean, Martyn, you'll, and I completely agree, Simon. I think it's spot on that. But Martyn, as the overwhelmed manager group, and I know from my own research that managers in social care are at their most fraught they've ever been. Is this something that we're seeing within the managers? And do you think there's a disparity between the male managers and the female managers in being able to speak up about the struggles that they've currently got working in social care?
From what I've seen in the group and on other sort of Facebook groups, there is a lot more of a female vocal voice. The men tend to be a bit more stoic and a bit more like to come across as a bit more resilient, apart from those voices like yourselves and Mark's, and a few others who actually stand out. I mean, I think Simon actually made some really good points earlier. I just want to go back to the point where you said you started going to the gym. Now, I am the author of The Overwhelmed Manager. I'm supposed to know all of this stuff, and I generally don't really worry about what other people think of me. It doesn't particularly bother me that much. But when I go to the gym, it's almost like you have to go stage by stage. So the first bit was I'll just go to the outside pool, and I'll be in there. I felt safe in there. Then I went to the running machine, and I could see some of the other machines. Well, I'm not quite ready for that machine yet, because I'm going to make a fool of myself. People are going to be looking at me, and we make it about us. And that's one of the key things that we do. Everything sort of looks inward. What does this mean about me? So, and I was actually laughing to myself on the running machine, thinking I've got to work myself up to actually go on to one of the other, to use the free weight. Well, I haven't got quite to the manliness level of using free weights yet, but just the very idea that even someone who's supposed to be a little bit more enlightened still feels that sense of I've got to be careful about what I do here, because I don't want to make myself feel look foolish, or something like that. So there's this sense that I need to keep my own sense of dignity. I need to keep my own sense of self. I can't show that too much. But actually, when it comes down to it, other people don't really care. The people in the gym, they don't really. When I look at someone who's obviously overweight in the gym and they're having to go, I don't think, oh, look at that overweight person, making a fool of themselves. I genuinely think good for them. And I think 99% of other people would do the same. So we worry about things that actually aren't really true. We make them up in our head and then find something to worry about, and then work it up and work it up and work it up in our head until it becomes a problem.
You've literally just intruded my entire thought process. I mean, I've been texting Mark and I'm like, oh my God, Mark, I've made it halfway into the gym today. It's amazing.
I was exactly the same. And yeah. I'm supposed to know what I'm talking about. And I was exactly the same. And this is only recent.
And I suppose there's something about being able to have that confidence in actually asking for the help as well. I stand there and pretend to be on my phone whilst I'm figuring out how to use the gym equipment. And actually, I'm pretty sure everybody in that gym would be happy to help if you just ask for the assistance. But it's that asking for help that if we can't do it when we're in the gym, how do we do it when we've got poor mental health? Yeah. If we can't ask for help in the simplest situations, how do we build up the courage to do it elsewise? And I don't know whether you've got any advice, Martyn, for how to build up that courage to ask for help, or, even if it's small steps, just to be able to build that confidence up.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. But my wife would say to me, why don't you just stop and ask for directions? I'm like, I can't ask for directions. That's completely out of the question. But you're right. We create a story, a narrative in our head, and then believe it to be true. And I relate, when I'm coaching people, I relate the story that when I go to the dentist, if I really thought about going to the dentist, I wouldn't go. So when I go, I know I'm going to park the car, and I'm thinking about everything else apart from going to the dentist. And I'm not deliberately trying to use that as a strategy. I just choose not to think about going to the dentist. So it's not like an anti-strategy. It's just not doing it. Otherwise, it just becomes another thing that's pointing to me towards, I'm going to the dentist, therefore I need to do something about it. But when you don't even need to do something about it, you're just going to go, and I'm going to think about reading a book, or I'm going to think about planning my next holiday, or whatever it is. And you just choose to do that instead of thinking about going to the dentist. If you think about, I need to ask someone to help, you can stand there and work it up in your head and get yourself in quite a state in quite a short period of time. But it's not coming from the gym. It's not coming from the instructor or anybody else in the gym. It's coming from us. It's coming from what we're thinking about it. So it's a self-fulfilled prophecy in that regard, that we are creating an experience and then living it out, and we don't need to do that.
Sorry, Simon.
Sorry, Adam. I was just going to say, Martyn, I think it's really interesting what you say about people, using the gym bit and saying people don't notice. 99% of people don't even notice somebody else. I guess I might have a slightly different take, which I don't know whether it's right or not, but I think that people do notice, and I think that people do judge, but I think we do it because we are worried about ourselves. And because if we were not worried about ourselves, we wouldn't notice, because we'd be busy getting on with doing what we were doing, whether that's walking down the street, whether it's seeing others. And there's something for me about perhaps one of the reasons that we worry so much about what other people think is because we worry so much about what people think of us is because we spend so much time thinking about other people, but not really caring about it. It's quite fleeting. It's quite it's sort of, oh, look at them, or oh, look at that, and I as I get older, I'm like, why did you think that? And we'll take myself to task about those sorts of things. But I do think that culturally we spend a bit too much time worrying about difference and diversity because we're not confident about who we are, rather than actually caring. And of course, as you get older and your world sometimes gets a bit smaller because you make it smaller because you be with the people that you want to be with rather than with lots of people, then you realize that none of it really matters. So I guess so to your point about how do we make it possible for people to ask for help, every single time it comes back to that piece of feeling confident enough to say, I don't know the way, I can't get there on my own, I need you to be with me, I need you to walk alongside me. And until we can do that, things will pretty much stay the same, unless we're also able to go, I recognize you're struggling, I'm going to lean in, I can see that you're pretending that you're on your phone because I used to do that, I'm going to come up and ask you whether you'd like help working out what that machine is. So there's something quite often, isn't there, about how do we say I'm not okay, or and we say that it's okay not to be okay, ask if you're not okay, when sometimes I think it's almost wider than that, which is, let's turn it on its head. Let's use our own experience to know when if someone's looking at their phone and they don't know where to go, why don't we just go and say, would you like help? If you live locally, so that they can just say, yes, please, rather than have to take that deep breath, that step, and go and say, please, I need some help. We lean in a little bit more. And that's part of, I think that's a really important part, particularly for anybody, but particularly for men, is how do you just go, I know that it looks like you don't know where you're going because you keep driving around in circles. I'm going to lean in and ask you rather than wait for you to come and ask me.
Thank you very much. So if you've got somebody that you're worried about their mental health, what would be your advice? Simon, I'll come to you. So somebody watching this has got a friend and they're worried about their mental health. What's the best way of approaching it to get them some support, both for the person and kind of the services that are out there?
So I think the key bit is if you do ask someone if they're all right, and they say they are, if your tummy tells you differently, then ask again, which we know is that sort of standard sort of advice. But more than that, I would say I've noticed over the last few weeks that you've been late. You haven't wanted to go out. You've not got your work in on time. That you've been really brusque with me, each time I've asked you how you are, whatever it is. You're not normally like that. Do I need to worry? That sort of this is what I've seen. This is different than you usually are. Do I need to worry, or do you want to talk about it? Whatever language you use? So finding the things that work for you. If we ask somebody if they're okay, often they will say yes, because that's what they're supposed to do. Whereas if you give a gentle sort of story, I guess, about why you're asking the question, then people can feel they do. And if you still at the end of it feel like they're not telling the truth, reminding them that you're saying, I'm worried about you. That's the reason I'm asking. I'd really like the opportunity to get help if we can together. That's why I'm asking, so that you're breaking down that barrier of, are you going to judge me? Are you going to laugh at me? Are you going to ignore me? So remembering what we know about masculinity, that you're supposed to know everything, that you're supposed not to ask for help, that you're supposed not to feel vulnerable, that you're supposed to be able to do it all on your own. That's the hurdle which we're jumping when we're asking men if they want help. And so anything that you can do to do it. I was trained in HIV by a woman called Carol, whose second name I've immediately forgotten. But she used to say, you've got to, Carol Painter, you've got to make sure that people know you've ripped up the facts. That facts that's been sent to everybody. So that shows you how long I was trained in HIV, doesn't it? If we were talking about faxes, but that's a whole different story. That you've ripped up the facts, and that they know that you believe something is different, and that's what you've got to do, however it is. And we find our own way, but also don't pretend to be an expert. All you've got to do is say, "I'm going to sit with you. I'm going to sit with you, and I'm happy to sit in silence, but I'm worried about you." And if we can all do that, then it will be a significant shift from where we are at the moment.
Go on, Adam.
No, I was going to say there's I think, and I don't know whether I'm wrong in saying this, so please tell me if it's a bad tactic, but when I've spoken with friends in the past, because obviously the community that I come from, there's a lot of, real bad mental health problems that my friends have faced and I have faced. And the one thing I've always done is, if they're not willing to talk to me, is I've then told them a story about myself, about how I felt once. And I've been in this position, I've done this, and I experienced this, and this is how I felt, and this is what helped me to basically go, look, you aren't on your own. We do experience this, and I'm showing you that it's okay to talk about it. I'm not belittling your experience or comparing what we're both going through, but just know that I'm happy to talk about it, and I won't judge you for saying what you're going to say, because there's no point in judging. We're just here to support each other, if you know what I mean.
And I think, Adam, the key, almost what you've just described, that I'm not belittling, I'm not saying it's the same, however you do it. And of course, the circumstance will always be different. But that bit of, there's a very fine line, isn't there, between I know what you're going through and I'm going to talk over with my experience. And so finding our way through and navigating that, I think, is the key sort of bit. So I remember when my brother died, and then my mum died, there were people who just somehow managed to sit on the right side of the line with going, I'm here if you want to talk, but I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to tell you exactly how it was for me and make out that's the same for you, but I am going to say the door's open. And those who, like, the door's open, I want to have a party about it, and actually that shuts you down. So I think there's just that piece of trying to find the way through and using gut instinct and the way to say, lots of people have had similar experiences. It's not exactly the same. I'm one of those people. Trust me to talk to me. Is a fine line to walk, and an important one. But the most important thing is demonstrating empathy, isn't it? What you're trying to do in there is say, I can feel empathy with your experience, and I'm safe.
Thank you very much. And I think that's some really good advice. I think for a lot of people, they might not necessarily want to talk about it, and sometimes it's about writing it down or putting it in a message. And Martyn, I'm going to come to you because obviously you've got your Facebook group and your support network, and obviously a lot of that is written down. And then I know from obviously conversations with you, people that might then pick up the phone to you. Do you see a difference between what's written down with some people and then what they might tell you, and what kind of advice and support do you kind of offer to people?
Well, I'm not a mental health professional, and I always make that very, very clear. I'm not a GP. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm a coach. It's very, very different. How Simon works is very, very different to how I work. But if I'm coaching someone on a one-to-one, the number one thing I must do early on is connect, and that's connect at a really deep level, soul to soul. So I'm working during those early stages in forming that connection. Once you form that connection, and you've got that because you get that nice warm feeling, and people start relaxing into it, as Simon was saying earlier, then you calibrate. You can start trying to get their world a little bit. But I'm not there to teach them anything. I'm just there, as Simon said so beautifully earlier, that sometimes just sitting in silence with someone is enough. If you're connected, there is information in that connection. And you don't need to have a long conversation, because sometimes that connection is enough. So I would connect, I would calibrate and try and get their world, and then let them steer the way. And that's always been a very successful way that I've worked. But as I was saying, I've never purported to be a mental health expert, but I am an expert in coaching other people and getting them to see something different. I suppose that's the only way I could put it.
And I think that's a really sort of good approach. Because I will say I'm reluctant. I seldom go and see people or talk to people about what I go through. I try and think, I'm going to solve it myself. My other half's a holistic therapist, so we do a lot of meditation. We do a lot of sort of guided sound baths. We do a lot of retreats. He's got his own spiritual center, and we'll sometimes just have 4 hours of just meditating in a room. And sometimes that's enough for me to be able to go through my thoughts and cleanse and ground myself. But it's not always that simple for people. And language has a lot to do with what we do. And, up until about 3 years ago, we would probably quite easily use the term someone committed suicide. But the idea of committing that act is not something that we tend to say now. It's usually someone's, died by suicide, or, someone has taken their own life. And not everyone is able or doesn't probably have that support network around us. Why do you think it is that it's men in their late 40s who are most likely to die by suicide? And why is it that it is men that are most likely to die by suicide than women? Is there something more we can be doing here? And what services are there out there? If, like we were discussing then, Simon, about being able to sit down and talk to people, if we know for a fact that the talking's not doing it, and we are really gravely concerned for loss of life, what are our options and what should we do? How should we approach it?
Gosh, sorry, I laugh only because it's a massive question, isn't it? And there are the most important thing that we can do if we believe that somebody has a serious if our stomach tells us that we think somebody might be thinking about suicide, the most important thing to do is to ask the question: are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about completing suicide? Whatever language, and do you have a plan? That the evidence shows us that is the most significant intervention that you can make at the point at which you believe that somebody is thinking about ending their own life. And that may seem counterintuitive. So Mark, you talked earlier about people saying about when you talk to children that you get them, by implication, you get them to think about things that they're not already understanding, thinking about. And if somebody does have a plan and they are thinking about ending their life, asking that question, they will normally say yes. You can find out what the plan is and you can put in an intervention. But more widely than that, it is about developing a culture, a society where we recognise and that nothing is too big or small to talk about. That when we are needing help and support, whatever it is, if it feels big inside our mind, it's big. And there isn't a hard or a harder. It is just hard, and that therefore you need to. And then you've got that requires significant education. That requires workplaces to do their thing. That requires services to be in place when people need services. It needs us when we know that things are challenging, to understand how to intervene at community, at church, at service, at employer level. But most of all, it needs us to not be afraid. It needs us to know that that these conversations are really important, and that if we are not in a position to have the conversation ourselves, that there will always be other people, whether that's give us a shout, whether that will be Samaritans, whether that will be a local service, of which there are a number of them. But it's really about building that emotional resilience, that emotional development, emotional literacy, where we all recognise and understand the part that we can play as individuals and as systems. But it's a massive sort of question. But we do know far more, I think, than we sometimes allow ourselves to think. We know, for example, in times like now, where you have a massive cost of living crisis, that there will be financial impacts, and that finances can be a major source of worry. We know that there are times that people experience suicide, or somebody's separated or bereaved or becomes unemployed. There are risk moments. So how do we learn to make sure that we are impacting and influencing and supporting people in those times?
Mark, I'm going to let you lead the next question, but I wouldn't be doing my bit if I didn't say to people, if you are feeling suicidal, or anyone who is feeling suicidal, you can contact the Samaritans 24/7. There are, like you say, so many other services out there to support you. Please do your research, have a look. We might try and collate some of the big ones and put them onto our Facebook and our social medias, just so people have them to hand this week as well. But if you are feeling, or someone who is feeling, please do get in touch with them. Try and find that help and find someone who can support you through this. But Mark, sorry, I'll let you lead the next question. And thank you, Simon.
So the next question I had was around, what can everybody in society do, and everybody watching this, what can they do to kind of raise awareness? So obviously when I write my columns with Log My Care, the ones that I write about mental health do get a lot of traction. And it might not be when I first publish them, it might be 2-3 weeks down the line. And Martyn, I know you have your daily blog with tips and pieces, and Simon, you've got your blog around. What can people do? I'm not saying that everybody needs to go out and start writing a blog, but what kind of one tip or tool would you say everybody could easily do to kind of break down the stigma or to raise awareness? Martyn, I'll come to you first.
Well, that's $1 million question, isn't it? What can everybody? I think just to be willing to look in a different direction, for me, is the biggest one, because we're very often stuck with the world that we feel that we're stuck with, because we don't know anything else, we don't know anything better, so we just feel stuck with what we've got, and therefore we don't want to change, and we can't see a way out. So just being willing to look somewhere else with an open mind. And I'll use the analogy that when I'm coaching someone in the very early stages, what I say to them is, imagine that you're going to a cinema, and when you go to the cinema, you suspend belief for that period of time, because otherwise you would ruin the film. There isn't a school of witchcraft and wizardry. Men can't really fly, or whatever it is. So you suspend belief. So when I'm coaching someone, I just ask them to suspend belief for that period. And in that period, then magic is allowed to happen, because we're working from a blank canvas. And like in a cinema where magic can appear on the screen, magic can appear in that space between us, if they're willing to suspend belief. I think that's the only way that I can sort of I can say that at the moment. I'm sure Simon will have a much better explanation than me.
No, I love that. Simon, over to you then. You've got to follow that.
Yeah, I don't have a much better explanation. I guess there's the bit for me would be there is always hope. Yeah, that what I guess we know is that, yeah, however dark the storm, however dark the situation, however difficult it seems, that there is always room for things to get better, that things do pass, but that requires us as society to recognise how bleak it can feel sometimes. And I think we don't always understand how bleak it feels, and we belittle and demean and reduce it because we haven't all felt the lowest that you can possibly be. So think about, I guess it goes right back to that bit, is holding hope in one hand and developing our empathy in the other. And I guess if you were to have a recipe for magic, it would be empathy and hope. So Martyn, you definitely got the up, the best bit there. But I do think it's that combination of our individual and collective sense of hope and our determination to have a better connection with people's experiences and a recognition that we may all be up one day, but we may well be down the next. That this isn't about us and them; it's about all of us in one way, shape, or form. Putting our one foot in front of the other, and I often use the sense, bumbling our way through the best that we can. And I genuinely think that we do bumble our way through the best that we can, however in control that we feel. So if we could all perhaps if we can all learn that we are all bumbling, and that some of us will bumble in different ways, different pace and different speeds, but we're all just trying to get through the best that we can and help each other as we do that.
Thank you very much. I love the word bumbling. I quite often just say I'm plodding along. If anybody else how I am, I'm always like, I'm just plodding along the same old. But Adam, what would be your top tip to reduce stigma or to raise awareness?
I mean, for me, it comes down to a lot of things, isn't it? It's understanding that what you feel is real. Don't let anyone tell you what you're feeling isn't real, because you feel it. That's what you are feeling. It's about understanding how to have that conversation. My biggest one is around judgment. I'm not going to repeat what Martyn and Simon have said in theirs, but for me, it's trying to decondition ourselves in that judgmental nature that all humans have. So I know I will sit down with someone and they'll go, "Oh God, have you seen what such and such has done to their face? Why have they had all that face work done?" And my first reaction usually when I was younger was like, "Oh God, don't they look awful? Looks like they've melted in the sun." I used to be rotten. Now, my first response is, and my first question to them is, how does it affect you? How does it affect you how that person looks? How does it affect you what that person does? And if it doesn't directly affect you and it's not impacting on your life and it's not, it's not causing you harm, why are you wasting your energy on it? Because what you're doing now is allowing yourself to go down this negative path of judgment. And if you judge one person and judge that person in front of another, you're making it socially acceptable for other people to judge other people, and you're making it acceptable for them to judge you as well. And it is like what we said, what we touched upon earlier on in the show. It's loving people no matter who they are for who they are, and not putting them in that situation where we are judging them. It's just being honest and kind and open. When Caroline Flack sadly took her own life, everyone covered their social medias with #BeKind. #BeKind, we have to be kind. And then you give it 3 months' time and something happens with one celebrity and it's, "Oh, let's cancel them. Let's get rid of them. This is awful. They're rotten. They're awful people." And the vitriol that goes on with it's just understanding that words can really hurt. And just to be honest, open and kind. It doesn't take much. It doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take up any energy just to be kind to people, and realizing what you feel in here is what other people feel within themselves, and just be supportive as much as you possibly can be. It's hard. We know we all want the likes. We all want those TikToks where we make fun of people and everyone then stitches it and goes, "Oh yes, look what I'm doing." And I hate to bring it back to Johnny and Amber, but it happened all the way through that really awful public libel trial, defamation trial between Amber and Johnny. And I'm sat there going, how can we support one person and you actually drag another person and publicly stone them with words, because that is going to affect them no matter what they've done. And that tarnishes our soul. It puts a little black mark on our soul, and we've got to not allow that to happen. So that would be my sort of public shaming of anyone who's judging, is just try and understand that we are all individuals and we don't need to judge. You know, we can love no matter what, and we can just turn a blind eye. We can just ignore stuff. If we don't like it, we don't need to look at it. You know, it's quite simple.
Thank you very much. I think for me, I always say to people, you know, asking for help or admitting that you need help is the biggest step. And I think then it's like taking the power back, isn't it? Because you haven't got those thoughts with you because you actually know that you need to do something. And I also think calling people out on old stereotype or statements or question or judgments that they make. And I see it all the time in life, you know, if children that might make a comment about something, or, you know, grandparents that might make a statement about something else. And it's calling people out and saying, actually, that might have been a view that was okay, you know, 5, 6, even last year, but actually times are changing very quickly, and that's not acceptable anymore, and that's not what is social, you know. But yeah, I'm very conscious of time. So Adam, I'll hand back to you to wrap it up, and then let Simon and Martyn get on with the rest of their evenings.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Mark, because my least favorite saying that people say, and I understand why they say it, but it's of the time. You know, it's of the time, so we can still enjoy it because it's of the time. And I'm like, no. It might be of the time, but because it's of the time, it stays there. It doesn't come into the future. It doesn't come into the present. Of the time means it once happened and we can ignore it because it doesn't actually matter anymore. And that happens so much with ethnicities. It happens so much with orientation, with gender. So much of this of the time is used as an excuse, and we can't have it. And you're so right, Mark. Times are changing, evolving really fast, and we need to go along with it. Martyn, Simon, thank you both so much for joining us this evening. I did say before we went live, the hour would fly by. And I wish we had another hour to continue talking, because it is such a huge topic that doesn't get as much attention as I think it should do. And like you said at the beginning, Simon, it's not to say that it's more important than anything else. It's not to say that, you know, woe is us, you know, a group of white men talking about our problems, you know, supersedes everyone else's. But we do have problems, and we do need to be able to talk about them, and there needs to be that safe space and that ability to do so. And the work you're doing, Simon, the work you're doing, Martyn, for our social care managers especially, is just absolutely incredible. And I just want to thank you both so much for joining us this evening. Mark, next week we are live, and I think we're continuing the theme, aren't we, with mental health, and we're on well-being next week, is it?
Yes, you were right. I had it ready because I knew that you would come and ask me, and I never have it normally ready. But yes, we are talking about, it's Wellbeing Week next week. So we are talking about well-being. So we've got Anushka, Farouk, and Sophie Coulthard joining us next week to talk about well-being, both in the workplace and within our personal lives. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it as well, because I am a tree hugger. I am a forest bather. I like going out in nature and connecting with you know, our natural surroundings. I'm a huge believer in natural meditation, where you don't need to sit and fold your arms and listen to music. You can just be out and listening to the birds and stuff. So I'm all about finding our well-being spots at the moment. So thank you, Simon and Martyn, so much. Thank you, Mark, for once again being a fabulous co-host alongside myself. Thank you, everyone else, for watching us, and we will see you next week for Wellbeing Week. Have a good evening and take care.
Bye.